and we are actually going to get started. If people have been late, wonderful. I'll let them in, and they can get caught up later. But just wanted to welcome you all. I am so excited. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I really wanted to offer something that will help people like really stay safe. And something that comes up so often is tech-related safety. And I don't feel confident myself. It's the area I know the least about. And so I am so excited to have Connie with us. So if you don't know me, I'm Sybil Cummin. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am the creator of Rising Beyond Power and Control and the Rising Beyond community, and have over a decade of working with victims and survivors of domestic violence and narcissistic abuse. But more importantly, I have Connie Matthews with us today, and she has worked in so many areas for the past 20 years in the cybersecurity kind of tech information. And so she also not only has this work experience, she helps others all the time. So she, like it says on her slide here, she's really passionate about giving back to her community. She is a founding member of a nonprofit called Empower Women of InfoSec. She works with schools, colleges. She does presentations like this today because she also really just wants to support people and help keep people safe. So without further ado, Connie, I'm going to pass it over to you again really quickly. If you have questions, I will try and monitor the chat as best I can. And if we don't get to it in that moment, we're going to have a little bit at the end where you can ask questions. So Connie, there you go. Have at it.
Thank you for inviting me. And this is obviously a really important topic. Everything is so digital these days. So I want to kind of preface that I'm going to throw a lot at you today. So don't be overwhelmed. What I always tell people is that you're going to walk away knowing more and differently have ways to protect yourself. Unfortunately, I think we all know there's not 100% way to protect yourself, but the more due diligence you can do, and some of the things for consideration around cybersecurity and the threats that come with that. At the very end, I will provide everyone also with this deck. I have put together several resources, and I've talked with some of my training partners throughout the US. So we're going to have a lot of step-by-step guides on like how to protect your iPhone or your Android and different things like that. So really what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about GPS tracking. We're going to talk about passwords, some Bluetooth stuff, wireless, banking and financial, social media, and just some general tips. And again, if people have questions, I'll try to pause between each slide. So if you have questions, try to answer those as they go along. But if we miss anything, we'll definitely come back to that.
Yeah, and she took the information that you gave me about what you wanted to know and use that to create this presentation.
Yep, perfect. So what you'll see is this is kind of a repeat, but I did add some extra things that were not in that first slide. So as you can see, I won't read all these, but we're going to be covering all these topics. All right, so Wi-Fi. So one of the things that we want to talk about here is that public Wi-Fi used to always be told that it's not secure as a general rule of thumb. Some companies have tried to take the next step. And so if you're going to use public Wi-Fi, you want to make sure that have you guys ever see the lock that says it's a secure, so it's like, it almost looks like a padlock. If you have that, you're normally relatively okay and pretty safe. I still personally will not use public Wi-Fi because many times when you're using public Wi-Fi, if it's not secure, what we say, nothing's encrypted. So if it's going on the wire and it's all in plain text, people can pick up passwords, they can pick up information that would allow them to access certain accounts. I use for personally, most cell phones come with hotspots now. You just can turn that on and that is a secure connection. So if you're unsure, you can always use that. I personally would not do personal banking, paying bills on public Wi-Fi, because again, you don't really want that information being noted. If you have to, again, use your Wi-Fi, your hotspot, or making sure that that locks there. And here's an article, and I won't open all these, but there's a lot of things changing constantly in the cybersecurity space. And so this kind of talks a little bit about, if you're going to use public Wi-Fi, what should you do? So then as we move into our home Wi-Fis, again, they're not secure by default automatically. So when you are looking at setting up Wi-Fi, you want to make sure that you change the default password. So all devices have a default password for the most part. And what that means is those default passwords, I can go out and do a quick Google search and find out what those default passwords. And if someone has that as their password, other people could log into your systems. So I tend to use phrases as much as I can. And I'm not saying you have to do this. Like my personal Wi-Fi, I think is either 65 or 72 long. I'm not saying you need to do that, but I also have been doing this for a long time. And so I take probably more precautions than the average person does. But if you use phrases, that's a big thing. So I'm going to show my age, but basically I switch letters and symbols, and it's like, we are the champions, my friends, and then I add numbers. And as you can see, you can like use threes for the letter E, you can use a $ for an S. So what I always tell people, if you can do phrases, and it could be a mixture of like your favorite music, your favorite movie, I would stick away from like things like that ask you like on Facebook, because on Facebook, people put their maiden name, they put what high school they went to. And if you've all like filled out those questionnaires, what you're going to see is those all are the same across the board. So you want to try to avoid using things that are easily guessable. If possible, most systems come with when you get like internet set up in your house, you can sometimes segment your guest wireless from your wireless. So for example, at my house, I have a Nest Lite for my furnace. I have that on my guest network, and my guest network, the only thing people can do is browse the internet. They can't actually get into my files. They can't get into my printers or anything else like that. It's actually not too bad. It's just, you normally will have the name of your wireless, and then you can say, so-and-so guest. I would also recommend, if you're renaming your wireless, you might want to change it from your first name or something that potentially your ex wouldn't know, because the more things that they are familiar with, there's more likeliness that they might be able to do something as far as tracking. So I'll pause real quick and see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you think about passwords, your ex knows all the things, everything about you.
Yeah.
Right. And so being really cognizant of changing all those passwords, making it something that they wouldn't know. And I'm thinking, so my internet at home is this Wi-Fi sucks. Just FYI. So if you're in the area and you see this Wi-Fi sucks, that's me. But yeah, coming up with something else that's not Sybil's internet at her home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this is, some of this is going to repeat, but you're going to see there's some themes that, and I really want to kind of ingrain some of these things just so it almost becomes second nature. One of the things is, you should never write any of your passwords on any type of Post-it note. There are password vaults, and there's two of them. One is LastPass, like LASTPASSS, and then one like the number one pass. And what the password vaults are is it allows you to only have to memorize one password, and then all of your other passwords are in there. So one of the things that I also tell people, when you have those security questions that you have to respond to, I lie on them. I don't put the real answer. So you could also put those in your password vault, because like Sybil said, your exes are going to know your maiden name. They're going to know your kids' names. They're probably going to know your animals' names. And and then what high school you went to. So those tend to be the questions that they provide, like from banking and any type of thing that you set up from a personal or professional information. So just making sure, the big thing is obviously if you lie on it, then you got to remember it. So just keep that in mind. And again, you want to not also, the other thing is you want to use a different password for everything. So password vaults are very helpful because again, you only have to remember one password versus all of them. Because what happens is if you use the same password across all of your systems, if someone is able to break into that, now they have access to everything, your financials, your banks, all your, healthcare data, all those kinds of things. So just, again, as much as you can, try to change those.
And Connie, what were those
Go ahead.
two password vaults called again?
So one is LastPass, so LAST and then PASS, and then OnePass, and it's the number one and then PASS. So it's not, one isn't spelled out.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, we talk about using numbers, upper, lower case letters and symbols. You should really not be anything below 9. There's different opinions. Some people say 20, some people say 30. So the longer you can make it, honestly, it makes it just exponentially harder to guess that. I would say in the next several years, we probably will not have passwords. There'll probably be biometrics and other things that organizations will use, but we're not quite there yet. So until then, definitely want to make sure that you do that. And then again, you can see, I also included a link of a great explanation of what a good password is. So once again, all of these will be presented to you at the end. I'll make this deck available to everybody. And then Sybil, it looks like there might be some questions. I can see that there's 3, but I don't.
Yep. No, that's what it was. Just what is the password, password vault, so that we can make sure we get that written down for people who want to do that. So I put those in the chat.
Yeah. And then what I'll do is when I send this to you, Sybil, I'll also put the links there too, so that they can go to those. And to me, those are 2 of the more there are some that are very difficult to manage. I feel like these are pretty reasonable. So kind of think of it like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's encrypted. So you can put everything there. So as we kind of move into the next thing with Bluetooth, just some things to consider. You should always turn your Bluetooth off when you're not in use. There's really no reason to have it on if you're not using it. And if you have an iPhone, I'm not as familiar with Androids. I've always had iPhones. You can go in and just turn it off. And then when you need it, turn it back on. The iPhone sometimes just automatically turns it on. But Bluetooth and wireless, more Bluetooth now than wireless, are generally not super secure. And so if you're not allowing Bluetooth devices, which some of the there's so many different things, and we'll talk a little bit later about these things as well, but just consider if you're not using it, just turn it off, because it's super easy to do and it does really protect. So thinking about cell phones, laptops, computers, speakers, appliances, mobiles, downloaded apps, Amazon, Alexa, cameras, all of those things have Bluetooth on them. I mean, refrigerators have Bluetooth. So just recently I had a friend where they bought a refrigerator and it was tied to, you probably have seen them on commercials where it ties inventory to what's in your refrigerator and kind of creates a list. Well, her refrigerator had some type of major defect and had to send it back. She didn't even think about anything about what was on there. It had her credit card information, her address, all of these things. And so she actually ended up getting hacked and they emptied out of all of her accounts because she sent it back. Now, I'm not sure where it is, was it, someone internally for this company, or did they just throw it out and not wipe the device? There's just so many things that can happen. So right now, again, almost everything has an IP address to it. So just think about, when you get rid of things, what kind of data is stored on those devices, or what kind of data is connected.
Is Bluetooth and these things, is this how they're finding out when I find my gray hairs, and then I talk about my gray hairs, and then on Facebook, all the ads are about gray haired ladies and what you can do to your hair?
So it's not specifically to Bluetooth. A lot of the cell phones and laptops, Alexa, they do have recording devices, and sometimes they're embedded with keywords that can pick up some stuff. There's argument whether they're recording all the time or are they just recording when certain words are being said. But I feel like they're listening all the time, because I don't know how many of you have done this. I've had a conversation in my car, and then when I come back to my home office and I open a browser or Facebook, everything I was just talking about pops up. So Again, try not to make everyone overly paranoid, but the reality is this kind of stuff is happening. So there are steps that you can take to protect yourself. The other thing is, never share sensitive information. So a lot of people have Fitbits and things like that. And I was just talking to a group of women on Monday. And if you think about a Fitbit actually has a lot of your medical information. So you don't want that to be being sent in plain text. So this is my personal choice. I try to do all of that in my home when I know it's an encrypted connection from end to end and not just in the open for everybody to see. So the other thing is you can also change your Bluetooth settings to be not discoverable. So have you guys ever opened up an app and it'll ask you what that is? And so if you have an opportunity to check, only open the Wi-Fi or open the Bluetooth when I'm using the app. So for example, like we all use a lot of like pizza, we order pizza on things, we have our GPSs on a lot of things, and then all these apps. I mean, I feel like all the restaurants now require you to order. It makes it much easier to order online versus calling anymore. And a lot of those are also on your devices. And so when you're not using it, just turn it off. And again, I was just talking about avoid pairing devices in public. Don't forget to unpair, install patches and updates. So most of you, if you've used Windows, any type of like Office 365, we call it Patch Tuesday. I would highly recommend on all of your devices, anytime they say you need to patch or do updates. So like on the iPhone, you'll get a message that's saying you need to update, or you can set it that it updates automatically in the middle of the night. It's really important to install patches and do updates, because a lot of times, a lot of those updates are around cybersecurity, and there's been some known vulnerability or something that could potentially cause issues from a cybersecurity perspective. So it's not that you have to do it immediately, but just keep in mind to try to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah. And are you going to talk about apps and stuff later? Okay, perfect.
Okay. So same kind of the things, with mobile devices. Again, you're kind of seeing the same thing, not using the same passwords. Jokingly, I own my own cybersecurity company in Columbus, Ohio. And I am so programmed, like literally when no one's in my house other than my husband and my 2 dogs, if I have to go up to the bathroom or go downstairs to get water, I hit Control-Alt-Delete every single time. And what that does is it locks your devices. So let's just say an example would be if your ex had to pick up your kids and you don't have a restraining order, and you leave your laptop open or your cell phone open, when you're in the bathroom, they could open up and see everything you're doing. So just get in the habit of Control-Alt-Delete every single time you leave a device on, like a laptop or, specifically, or a PC, home PC, if you have a tower and things. Like most people have laptops these days, but, just something to think about. The other thing is when you're doing shopping, you have to be really careful when you go to the Apple Store and the Google Play for Android and Droid. Most of you probably have heard of Angry Birds. And Angry Birds, when it first came out, there were a ton of malicious applications. And so you want to make sure you go to trusted sources. And, sometimes it's really hard to figure out, but like you want to try to make sure, like when you're reading the description, where it's coming from, and just try to validate that it looks right. And I always tell people to trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right about an application you're downloading, I wouldn't download it. And you can do some research on some Google, you can do some Google searches. And again, Apple is pretty good about vetting the apps before they get approved in the App Store, but they still miss things. And so does Android and Droid. So you just have to be careful. And then again, really trusting from known sources. And, like, for example, I don't know if you've ever done a Google search, like I bank with Fifth Third. And when I go to log into my bank, 3 other URLs come up that have nothing to do with Fifth Third. So pay attention when you're looking at the URL, the website address, to make sure that it actually is the organization that you're doing either shopping or downloading things. And again, we're going to keep, though a lot of repeating things, but making sure you always keep your software and all those updates going at all times.
Well, yeah, and I think that it is so important. So my husband's company actually sent money to someone else
Yeah.
because the email that they sent had, or the email that was sent to their money person had an S
Yeah.
on the end of the company name rather than just the company name. It's not something that was caught, and hundreds of thousands of dollars went to who knows where, right? We
Yeah.
have no idea where that went. Um, and so it is really, really important to notice those things. And especially if your partner is tech savvy,
Mhm.
you need to know that. Or if they have people around them that are tech savvy. Because again, yeah, you can Google search anything and learn how to do anything if you
Yeah.
have the will to do it.
Between YouTube and Google for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we kind of already talked about this too. Kind of if you're gonna maiden name, high school, pets names, kids names, etc., favorite football team. Those are so easy to guess. And authentication happens by, and we'll talk a little bit more about what multi-factor authentication, and you're all doing it, and you may not just understand that's what it's called. But the other thing I would highly recommend is when you authenticate. So let's just say, IP addresses change even in home addresses. So I'm sure most of you have probably seen an email, like if you go on your bank and then they'll ask you to verify. My advice is don't have it go to your email, because if someone's hacked into your email, they will also get that code. So I always recommend having every code sent to your cell phone, because that's two different devices. The likeliness of both devices being stolen or taken or being able to get into both devices, again, it can happen, but the likeliness is, your risk is very much lower than if you have it going to your email. So just things to keep in mind. I already mentioned this, make sure if you're going to do the security questions, I would lie on them and not put the right answer. That way no one can authenticate and try to act like they're you. And again, don't write passwords down, use a password vault.
And we have a couple questions about a
Yeah.
password vault. So first, are you going to create a password to access your password vault?
Yes. Yeah.
And then what do you think is the best way to give your passwords to an emergency contact, a beneficiary, right? Like somebody should probably have access to your information. What do you think the best way to do that would be?
So I'm going to also send you. So I'm an advisory for a company that used to be called Lockdown, and it's actually an encrypted end-to-end device. And honestly, it looks very similar to text messaging. I wasn't able to get a hold of them. I'm going to see if I can get some license donated, but this would be a great thing. So basically what you can do is you can share information with trusted individuals, whether that's your parents, your best friend, your sister, your brother, if you have older kids. So if something was to happen, you could put wills, like you could put documents in this thing too. So you could put your will in there, you could put all kinds of stuff. So I will like I said, hopefully I can talk to them next week, and then I'll send you where they are, because they started off as a corporate solution, and they realized their solution was actually better used for individuals. And I have sold it to some companies for like the CIO, the CEO, like the C-suite of corporations, the CFO, CEO. And it was like that one of the things they loved about was ease of use. So I'm going to see if I can get some licenses donated or maybe a discount of some type. So I'll definitely provide you with that. I mean, any other way would be, some people put it in a bank vault, or if you have, any type of device that you could lock it in, like a safe or something. But it's kind of nice to have it digitally on the phone. And, like I said, you're allowed to share with certain people. And then let's just say someone in that group somehow became someone you couldn't trust, you can remove them from that group and they cannot see anything. They can't do screenshots of it. They can't copy and paste it. So like I said, it's a pretty awesome tool that I've been involved with for quite some time. So again, I'll try to get that for you guys.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think you said there might've been a couple other ones. I just want to make sure.
I got them all.
Okay. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on this one. So there's different opinions on VPNs. A lot of the companies after, like with COVID, a lot of companies require for you to do all your work on a VPN. And basically what it stands for is virtual private network. So basically it's an encrypted, it encrypts everything within the VPN connection. And so what that means is you can kind of segment data so that people can't see it. Like McAfee and Symantec, they actually have some built-in VPNs. Like I have one on my phone that came with me buying McAfee. So again, I don't want to spend a lot of time with it, but some of you probably are familiar with this. A lot of companies require this, and especially when COVID happened and we all moved from working in offices to working in our homes, there were a lot of those security functions. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean this isn't necessarily something that will protect you, but it does there are some controls within the virtual or VPN that may or may not help. But again, this is mostly used for business purposes. Okay. So credit card and identity theft, again, these are common things. Shred documents that contain personal and credit card information. So the other thing, again, if your ex has to come into your home, don't leave the stuff laying out because they can take a picture of it. You would never know. So I would recommend, having it in a safe place. If you have a safe, perfect. If not, like someplace that people don't have easy access to. Also, don't write your credit card data down because again, it's so easy, especially with online stuff. It's really easy just to, if I have all that data, it's easy for someone to take all of that. And you probably have heard of like LifeLock and all of these companies. A lot of the credit companies offer identity theft. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but for me personally, I don't use them. I do due diligence. I log into my bank account normally at least once a day. I know what's in there. I would say also be careful to watch transactions that are like 50 cents, 19 cents, 10 cents, because sometimes if a group of people have stolen your credit card data, they'll try small amounts because that won't flag anything. And then once they know your account's active, within very short periods of time, they can empty all of your accounts. The good news is with credit cards, if you call and talk to the fraud department, they normally will reinstall. Like if you have a $5,000 credit limit, they send it over to fraud. They give you your $5,000 back for your credit card. With debit cards, it's not as easy. As you will generally get your money back, but it could take 60, 90, 120 days. And if someone wipes your checking account, then next thing you know, your mortgage is bouncing, your rent is bouncing, your car. So I tell people if you have a credit card, and I'm not saying a credit debit card, try to use credit cards more than debits because it is exponentially harder to get the money back. And it can take a very long time. Also check your your credit score quarterly, because it'll tell you if there's any inquiries. And so, for example, like with your exes, they may try to buy something on your credit or use your information. So you can also set up, like a lot of credit cards automatically, they provide that. You can set up that you get alerts that every time someone runs your credit. Sometimes it can be annoying, but it's a good way just to kind of keep track of those types of malicious activities. And again, we'll talk about strong passwords. And then I also tell people if you're going to be traveling or you're buying something you normally don't buy. So let's just say you're going to go buy a $5,000 couch or something. I normally will call the fraud department and say, look, I'm going to be purchasing from this store. This is about what it cost. Because sometimes, I don't know if you've ever had it where you'll buy something expensive and your purchase will get declined. And it's because it's been flagged as fraud. And sometimes you'll get a text message, sometimes you don't, but that can just help, if you're like, especially if you're traveling through multiple states, if that's something you normally don't do and you're getting gas in every state, at one point they may think it's fraud. And, again, I said like the $5. And if you find that like your partner is using, you can freeze your credit, where no one can actually use your credit to apply. And so we provided a Federal Trade Commission article on how you would do that. But just remember, if you freeze your credit, and you need to use it again, you got to make sure you give them a call because it'll also freeze it for you as well.
Yeah. And do you have any thoughts? We have a lot of members and people that I have worked with where there's one password for a joint account, and then one partner either removes you from it or they take the funds from it or whatever that is. Do you have any ideas? I don't know if this is under your, in your scope of how to kind of protect yourself from that. All of a sudden you have no access to the online banking and your partner has access, but it's your stuff.
So it's a little harder when you're married because there's laws that require dual signatures on stuff, but most banks will allow you to remove people, but you can't add people with multiple signatures. Not all banks do that, but I've worked with several banks here in Columbus that, and I run some nonprofits that we have bank accounts in. When people leave our board, we remove them. So what I would recommend, if you're in that situation, I would meet with your banker and explain to them the situation and say that you need them to remove access. If they have a credit card, they can actually shut the credit card down. So I would say, if you're in that situation and you're trying to get out or you're already out, if it's before, I would try to figure out a way to meet with your banker without them knowing and get all that set up prior. But if you're already separate, then I would say if the account is, you're the core, the head person on the account, you can definitely go to the bank and have people removed. So that would be my recommendation, to do that. And honestly, if they won't do that, then I would ask them that you want to close the account and open a new account.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't, in most banks, they don't generally charge for that. It's just doing, filling out some paperwork and you're good to go. And like I said, it gets a little trickier when you're married, if you're trying to withdraw a bunch of cash. Normally there's like a dual kind of signature required, that you're taking a lot of money. But again, I think if you're comfortable having that open dialogue, with your banker, they can walk you through that process. And so again, we kind of talked about a lot of this, but monitoring your accounts regularly, avoid clicking on unknown URLs and emails. So the other thing I will say is that the text messaging from banks is getting out of control right now. So for example, if you don't bank with someone and you get some emergency, just delete it. Because if you don't bank with them, there's nothing for you to do. If it is your bank, what I generally do is I will never call back on an email. I will not click on a link in email, like if you get an email to them, I just don't do any of those things. On the back of your credit cards, there's a number or a customer service number that's on there. I would highly recommend just calling and talking to the fraud department, because what happens is, I didn't really include a whole lot of information just because, so there's a thing called a keylogger. And what a keylogger does is basically, like if you're clicking on a malicious link, it can install software that you will never know that's on there unless you're very technical and you know how to go to basically what we call the root of the computer. And basically what that keylogger does is it captures every stroke on your keyboard. So they can get passwords and all of those things. And again, it's not easy to find. Generally, you're going to have to talk to someone that's pretty technology savvy. And honestly, what ends up happening is you have to completely wipe your device and then rebuild it. It's not super hard to do, but if you don't know what you're doing, it could be a little frustrating. So that's one of the biggest reasons you just don't want to click on links, or you can log in to your bank or whatever credit card. And normally there's like an email of some type that'll say, we're seeing some suspicious activity. You might get a text message, but again, I always just go to the source that I know that is a good source and it's not a malicious source. And then multi-factor and encryption. So since I can only see some of you, so basically what multi-factor is an example would be when you log into your, let's say your bank account and your bank doesn't recognize the IP that you're coming from, it'll say, can you, basically there'll be a box that says email or cell phone. and you click one of those, and then they'll send you normally a 4 to 6-digit code it's validating that it's you. And again, just as a reminder, remember to always do it to your cell phone and don't do it to your email, because if someone's hacked into your machine, they have the full access to what you're seeing. So that's just an extra step you can take. I don't know about you guys. I feel like my cell phone should be like permanently attached to me because I own my own business. So I always have it with me. So it's just a good practice to continue to do that. Again, making sure you patch and keep your systems up to date is huge, because there are a lot of security updates in those patches. If you see obviously any suspicious activity or concerns, again, notify your bank using either the website that you log in on your account, or the numbers that are on the back of your credit card. And they can also alert for special activities. So a quick example, I was traveling to Pennsylvania to meet with one of my clients, and I wanted to bring my husband and my 2 dogs, and a pop-up came, and it looked legit, and they were like, well, we need to call you. I called and gave them my credit card number because I was multitasking. And I was like, as soon as I did, I was like, why did you do that? And so I called American Express and said, I need you to reissue me a new card. And that morning when I woke up, someone basically charged $125,000 worth of electronics. I wasn't responsible. They knew it, but I don't know if the transaction actually went through, but that's just a really quick example. If you ever do something and you're like, oh my God, I don't think this is right, I would just call your bank. Just better to be safe than sorry. So just something to think about there too.
Yeah, I had a question. So with the keylogger and other things like that, how easy is that for a Joe Schmo who may be fairly tech savvy to set that up?
So I'm not going to say it's super easy. Generally, what happens is it's embedded in the URL of the link that you click on. And as soon as you click on it, it basically installs software on the back end where you're not going to know it's there. I don't think it's trivial, like just not anyone can do it, because you're going to have to write some code to make that happen. So that's where it gets like really important, like being careful what you're clicking on. One of the things, what I always tell people, and it's kind of a pain, but like if you have that gut feeling, you're like, something doesn't seem right, you can actually right click on the link. And if you look, sometimes like even if it's a bank, it might be misspelled, or there's a bunch of extra stuff on the end that just doesn't look right. And again, that's one of those things where for a keylogger generally to be installed, you normally have to download or click something. And I would say you probably will figure out relatively quickly if someone's doing that by some of behaviors, or maybe someone's using your credit card. But you may not know that it's associated with that, because, retail companies and people that, take credit cards, they could be breached on their end too. So there's not like, you can't say if this happens, then they have a keylogger. But just kind of watching that suspicious activity and being diligent about what you're doing. Those are the kinds of things that can potentially help avoid some of those things. And if you really think that someone has installed that, and again, like, here's the thing, laptops, desktops, if your ex has to come into your house, or someone that maybe is associated with them and you're not sure, do not lock it. I mean, because, or take it, if they're coming away, put it in like upstairs in a bedroom or somewhere that they're not going to be able to walk in. Try to go to the bathroom, honestly, before they come, you know what I mean? So that you're not leaving them unattended, are things
Yeah.
that I would do.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, right, like kids go back and forth from house to house, making sure you're careful about what goes from house to house.
Yeah.
I shared a story. My audience, I think, knows the story, and I shared it with you, Connie, where a woman that I work with was scheduling a vacation for her kids, and she looked at, signed up for a hotel and all these activities and all of the things. And the next day, her ex, before she had a chance to tell her kids about this amazing trip and adventure she had planned, he had scheduled the exact same trip. So where the hotel was, the exact same hotel, the exact adventures that they were going to go on, all the things. And so there is a way that this person knew every single place she was clicking on. And so I'm not sure it was that keylogger, but it is something that clearly happens.
Yeah. And and it's like what I was trying really hard not to do today. I don't want to scare you guys to death. I mean, I know you've been through a lot already, and having, it's hard not to be paranoid. It's hard to probably trust again. So really what I'm trying to do is just make you more aware so that you can make better decisions. I mean, we even say this in cybersecurity. We have to be right 100% of the time. A bad guy, a vector attacker only has to be wrong one time. And it's kind of the same thing. And so you can't live your life to the point where you're so afraid to do anything, because we use technology every day in our life. And so again, there's a couple steps that you can take, and you can see some common themes that I've been talking about that I think will really help. And again, there's going to be some additional things that we're going to talk about. So the next, honestly, thing I want to talk a little bit about is social media. You can hide, and you can lock down where only certain people can see things. You can lock down where you can't, like friends of friends can't see anything. I would say, as you're going through some of the things that you're personally going through currently, I'm not saying you should never be on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, name whatever social media you have, but there are some things that you can do to protect yourself. I personally, if I was in your shoes, I would probably just hide my profile until things calmed down and I felt comfortable, like I could go back on. But, you think about, you probably still have some mutual friends. And if you have kids don't mean anything, but they could just disclose something. There's just so many things that can happen. So again, you have to kind of figure out where you're comfortable and what you're comfortable sharing. But all of these apps, if you go into the privacy settings, you can actually go in and lock things down, so that it's not completely open. Like even on LinkedIn, if, professionally, you can lock down that the only people, that no one can see your connections are only the people you trust. So there's lots of things you can do in all of those social media platforms. I would also try to avoid, a lot of people on social media like share too much information. So I would avoid, like, if you have a vacation coming up, or you're going to do this or that. I tend to, like, if I'm going to post pictures of vacation, I will post when I get back. Because not even your exes, but other people watch social media, and people have had their homes broken into, all kinds of crazy stuff. So just, again, being due diligent on how you post and what you're doing. Just be careful with those types of things. And the other thing is, you probably have all seen everybody's Facebook account, I feel like, has been hacked. So if you get a friend request from someone that you're almost positive you already friends with, go in your friends and make sure that you are connected with them, because your ex, it's not very hard to go in and create a profile that looks like someone, and it could be your ex or a bad vector trying to portray who you are. So again, every time you get a friend request, go in, make sure you're not already friends with them. If you are, you might want to send your friend a text message saying, hey, I think you've been hacked. Generally, the best way to fix that is by changing your password, but I feel like everybody gets hacked on Facebook. So just things like that, be super careful. I would also say, if there are people in your life that were mutual connections and you don't trust them, remove them. There's no need for you to be connected with them, because you don't know what they're telling them. So like the nice thing on Facebook, and I think same thing with LinkedIn, when you remove people, they don't know that you've been removed, and you can actually block people too. So if you have someone bullying you, an ex or someone that's associated, like a in-law or whatever that might be, you can block people so that they don't have access to stuff. So
That's what
again,
I was going to ask,
yeah.
because we had a question is, will it block them from seeing your stuff?
Yes.
And will it block them from seeing, like, if they tried to click on my profile, would they be able to click on that as well? Do you know?
So I feel like it's changed over like time. The last time I looked, if you block someone, they can't even, like, when they do a search, they can't even find you. But
Okay.
things are constantly moving. So I don't want to say 100% that happens. And that's why I'm like, I feel like honestly, my advice is if you're to the point where you're being bullied, and you're like, and this a lot of bad things are happening around social media. I know we all love social media to some extent. Again, my personal thing is if I felt super threatened with what was going on, because you got to remember everything that's put on the internet never really goes away. You can delete it on your end, but you don't know who else already has done a screenshot, or like even if someone shares something you do, all of what you put is still out there. And so, again, depending on where you are, you may or may not want to use social media. Because generally sometimes over time things will start to settle down and hopefully they move on and don't bother you anymore. But then there are people that are just super crazy that will never let go. So again, your situation better than you. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't be on social media, but just be careful.
Yep.
And honestly, trusting your gut is probably one of the most important ways to protect yourself. I mean, I feel like in my life, every time there's something that just doesn't seem right to me, and when I ignore it, I'm like, damn it, why did I not trust my gut? Like, you know how you use that
Uh-huh.
sinking feeling like crap, why did I just do that? Or why did I just say that? Or, so really pay attention. Because I think sometimes when you go through what all of you've been through, I think you really do have to rely on your gut. And a lot of times when we're in these situations, we know we need to get out of them, but it's, we all know it's not always as easy to do that. But again, trusting the gut is super important. Okay. So I'm hoping all of you have heard the term Internet of Things. And what that really means is everything's connected to the internet. So in your phone, and if you have like sometimes there is an app for wireless that you can download on your laptop too. You can go into your settings and you can basically see what devices are connected. Now, what I will caution you is that I live in a condo, so when I open my wireless, I see probably 50 different accounts. Um, so this is again where you got to be careful, where you want to make sure everything's locked down and requires a password. But let's just see you see something that you didn't set up and it's connected. That is one way to kind of see if someone's connecting to your devices within your home. But sometimes they can come up, like I have a bunch of wireless speakers throughout my house. And sometimes they're named something that it doesn't even correlate to like let's just say it's a Bose or JV, I think JVS or something like that. It won't even call it that. So you have to also make sure, that it really, and a refrigerator might have a model number. It could have the name of the machine. It could be like a Samsung, GE, whatever that is. So that's one just ways you can always check to see if there's some like weird things going on. And again, anytime that anything that's connected to the internet, you want to always password protect all devices, all accounts. Same thing with my phone. Like I have an iPhone, so I use facial recognition and a PIN. And I also went into my settings, and again, there's some links to show you how to do this. But for me on the iPhone, I have it set if someone guesses my password 10 times, more than 10 times, it wipes my entire phone. So all of these cell phones also have backups. So like I make sure I back up everything to the cloud so that it doesn't matter if someone takes my phone, it's completely wiped when I get a new device, or if I lost the device, or, like the other thing is kids sometimes will play around phones and they can do it too. So just, that's why I say it's so important to back up. So you can basically reinstall everything from the backup. But just good, again, same thing, your cell phones should always have a password on them. And I would probably recommend not giving those passwords to your kids if they're going back and forth, because we all know people that do what they've done to all of you, they're manipulative and they'll get those passwords from your kids. And your kids don't understand, especially when they're younger, they don't understand all that. So I would personally not, if there's that shared custody, I wouldn't give the kids the passwords. And on their devices, you can embed the password so that they can't, they don't know it. Like I would keep the passwords to you and not share passwords with your kids.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and maybe I think you're going to go through it, but that like possible GPS of
Mhm.
a phone going back and forth so that they have access to call you, and things that can be put on a phone that can then track your stuff. I think that's a really pretty big concern for lots of the people that we work with.
Yeah, so some of this stuff is really hard to find. You really have to be somewhat of an expert on some of these things. But I can tell you, like, and again, I think one of my girlfriends, Liz, is on this call, and she may know, because I know we always joke with her that she doesn't have a iPhone. But if you ever really, really suspect something, you can go to the iPhone store and they can run some diagnostics and they can look to see if there's things installed on your phone that you may or may not know, because sometimes they may show up in the list of the apps. And so that's the other thing. You can actually go, like, at least on the iPhone, I know I can go into my settings and I can see every app that's been installed. So if you see something that's not recognizable, or you know you're not using, you can always delete it. But if you're really, really concerned, like that something's on there, I would I would personally like take it to the iPhone store. And I had a friend that worked for a company that they installed basically spyware on all of their employees' devices without telling them, and they were able to read all of their text messages. And I tried to go through some of the things and I couldn't find anything, but when she took it to the Apple store, they were able to find it. So some of this stuff is easy to find. Some of it, if you don't, like, you have to kind of understand the operating systems and being able to do some of those things. But again, I think if you went to the Apple store and you kind of explained your situation, you don't have to tell them everything, but just say, someone got a hold of your phone and you think they may have installed some things that are not appropriate. And I don't think, I can't tell you they won't charge you, but when people I know have done that, they haven't charged them. So that may be a question you may want to ask. But you can always call like Apple support too, and things like that. So just, something to keep in mind. And as we go through, I actually do have some things about GPS and tiles and all of that we'll talk about. A lot of the routers that you currently have, even if you get them through your internet provider, they have firewalls. And it drives me crazy. So anytime I've ever had like a Time Warner, or there's name your, AT&T, your internet provider, the folks will always say, just use the default password. Don't ever listen to that. Never, ever, ever use the default password. Like, change it immediately. And so a firewall can help a little bit too. Again, in security, there's no absolutes 100%. What we're trying to do is lower our risk as much as possible. And again, I've said this a million times, security patches, super important. So if you have wireless speakers, you have, like, for me, I do a lot of podcasts and I do a lot of public speaking. So I have an external HD camera, and I also have a Blue Yeti, which is a professional microphone. When I'm not using it, I unplug everything. All of my cameras I cover. So for example, if you have kids, it's super easy to hack into cameras. If you have kids, I would recommend, there's covers that you can buy on Amazon. They're not very expensive. If you don't want to buy that, just put like a piece of paper, like something that's thicker, because cameras sometimes on your laptops don't always necessarily tell you when they're active. So for example, the HD camera I have, I know it's open because there's blue lights on it. But every night before, when I'm done working, I put my cover on it, and any listening device, I turn the Bluetooth off. And I also, if I can unplug it, like, TVs, you don't want to unplug every time you use it. But TVs have listening devices in them too. And so it's just one of those things to be really, really careful. The other thing is really quick too, and I think I'll cover this later, but if you were with your ex and you shared an Apple ID, you need to get your own Apple ID, because if you share an Apple ID, they have access to everything you have access to. It's free to get your own Apple ID. So anything you have shared, you want to make sure you do your own and then disconnect that person that you don't want to have access for. I also can provide, I actually did a tip and tricks for how to secure your kids. I'll send that to you, Sybil, as well.
Okay.
Because I mean, most people, you know, if they don't have their own children, you have nieces and nephews or whatever. So there's some good, really good tips on, you know, cybersecurity with children too.
Yeah, and I want to make sure, just giving you, I'm a chatty Cathy, so we are just at about 1 and we have until about 1:15 with everybody.
Okay, perfect. So we talked about multi-factor authentication. So it's basically something you have there's normally a 3 handshake where it requires multiple things to have multi-factor authentication. What we see mostly is 2-factor, and that was, like I was saying, you get an email or a link, you know, when you're trying to log in and you get that password on your cell phone, that's 2-factor authentication. So anytime you can do that, you know, for any type of financials or whatever, if they give you an option, definitely use it. It's really not that hard. You get the number on your cell phone and then you're on your own way. All right. So again, I won't spend a lot of time. There's a bunch of different scams out there. These aren't going to be specific to your ex, but these are the types of things that people do to try to, you know, basically be able to hack your information and get your financials and credit card and all that stuff. All right. And we talked about keyloggers, so I won't spend too much time. Again, there's all kinds of scams out there, phishing attacks, and phishing attacks is when you get a link and it's malicious and you click on it and something bad happens. We know about identity theft. With COVID, there was a ton of scams, and every time there's a natural disaster, there's a ton of people that will send stuff out for you to donate. You have to be really careful because a lot of that stuff is scams. Again, things to think about: no reputable company will ever ask you for your username and password. Generally speaking, if someone asks you for your full social security number, never give it to them. They shouldn't ask you for that. If you know, like if you've called your bank, they say your last 4 of your social security, the last 4 of your, you know, phone number. So it's normally just a subset of that data, not the whole data. Again, if you have been compromised, notification is generally sent by US mail, or they'll send you a secure link to your, when you log into your bank. And then again, don't click on links that you're not familiar with. Again, we talked about right clicking. Be careful what you download. If something doesn't feel right, trust your gut. Turn Bluetooth off, turn GPS off. Every app that you have, GPS does not need to be turned on when you're not using it. So if you have the option to only have it when you turn it on or when you're using the app, definitely make sure you do that. And so here again, these are going to be a ton of links that generally have pictures, and it will describe how to do things. So I did it for your phone, for GPS tracking. I also sent some general awareness. There's also tiles and air tags, because I know that was something that came back pretty often, how to check that. So there's settings in your phone that you can go in, and you can be actually notified that someone if someone has an air tag that's around you in the vicinity and trying to access your phone. And then there's like a $3 app that you can buy if you have an iPhone, that's, you know, to prevent hacking. And then there's a lot of great AV products out there. Malwarebytes has some free versions, and they have some of the GPS and the tile stuff built in. So you may want to take a look at that. And they're a really reputable cybersecurity company. So it's like a company that you can definitely trust. And then there's some just general links about secure web browsing, internet safety, keeping loved ones safe, how do you protect your family. And then here's my contact information. And I know I threw a lot at you, but I hope it helped. And if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. I mean, again, none of this guarantees that nothing bad's going to happen, but you know, at the end of the day, you want to lower your risk so it's easier to manage.
Yeah, and we have a couple questions.
Okay.
So one, I'm not sure if it was answered in the chat or not. I feel like it's a little bit more specific. If you have already been blocked by someone, how do you then block them? Does that make sense?
So generally, like on Facebook, if someone blocks you, it removes them from your friend list.
Okay.
If for some reason they're showing up, you can block them. But everything I've ever seen, when someone blocks someone on Facebook, so if they blocked you, then you have no access to their stuff.
And would that mean
But
they have no access to your stuff then as well?
potentially, it depends on how they did it. So you can always try to find the person, and if they're showing up in your friend list, then you can, like, I think you can go in the settings and block them. But generally when you block, I don't think they can see what you're doing. Now, if you have mutual friends and they're tagged and they're friends with them, like, that's where it kind of gets tricky on how the settings are put up.
Yeah. And so then also, unfortunately, kids are always caught in the crossfire
Mhm.
of these things. Is there a way to protect your kids' credit and your kids' financial security from their biological parent?
So you can put blocks on children or kids' credit. So it can probably get tricky, and it's probably different in every state because, like, laws are really weird. So there's no, like, cut and dry answer, but the first step, I would put a lock on their credit. Because honestly, if they're under 18, unless you're like trying to, if they're trying to buy a car or you're going to give them a credit card, there should be absolutely no reason why their shouldn't be locked. So that's pretty easy to do. You can actually work with the credit bureau reporting, and you can get that done. Where it might get a little tricky is depending on how the divorce, where it's at, who has custody, who doesn't have custody. That's where it gets a little tricky. I would say in that case, if you have an attorney that you're working with, that may be something you could ask them to see, like, what limitations or no limitations you may have. And they probably can provide you like legal advice on how to do that.
Yeah, because unfortunately, our kids are going to be where they have the most access to
Yeah.
us.
And if your ex actually tries to use their credit without their consent, there are probably laws that I would have to assume it probably would be a felony charge. And so if you're in a really bad situation like that, I would notify law enforcement and see like what they can do too. And then, probably talk to your attorney and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, just trying to protect our kids. Well, if anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the chat. And we are happy to stay on for a short bit more to answer those questions. I know this just comes up pretty often, and it can be really scary. Just, the members in my community have brought up a few things that seem questionable. And just over the years, there's just been questions with mostly women. I do work with men, but women that I with, and that GPS related things and being able to track you. I had one woman who was actually tracked to the shelter that she was at because it was something on her car. Yeah. And so then they had to, the shelter was then all those, women that were at the shelter were in danger. And again, like people being able to track everything that you're typing or you're searching or you're printing, all of those things are scary. I would say, just based on my experiences, if you have any apps that you had together, get rid of them.
Yep.
Download them with other things, use a different email to sign up. We had one woman that was found at her not even that good of a friend's house because she ordered a pizza. She ordered a pizza because it said, hey, I'm on the pizza app. Do you want to log into your account? Right. And not knowing, of course, sure. It's like the password's already in your phone. And so that is how this person found her, because the pizza place was near that friend's home. And I would say that's what's tracking her.
So if you had shared apps, definitely delete them, reinstall them, and it's free to set up as many emails as you want through Gmail. You know what I mean? I would create a brand new email that they have no idea. I wouldn't even share it. Like if you have younger kids, don't even share it with them, because again, manipulative people have a really great way of being able to get information. And like in cybersecurity, we do what's called social engineering. And honestly, I've actually done some of those, and people automatically trust me. And so I've gotten people to give me all kinds of information. So there are some things that I would be very protective and only provide that email to your most trusted sources, because that way for validation, you know what I mean, that they don't have that, and make it something they're not going to guess. Like I wouldn't use your name or some numbers, like just make something up. And then that way, if once you like delete it and then reinstall it, you can sign up with a different email and they won't have access to that. So yeah, any type of shared accounts, you need to separate as quickly as possible, because what you have access to, they have access to.
Yeah. And then we have a question about passback or passpack. Have you heard
I've
of
never
that
heard of that
vault?
one. Let me look. I've never heard of that one, but there's definitely a ton out. I think, like I said, LastPass and OnePass are pretty common ones that I would recommend. Not saying that that's not a good vendor. I just have never heard of them.
Yeah. And if you do have weird experiences, like your partner has scheduled the exact same trip you were going to take,
Yeah.
or something like that, or they always know what you're doing before you have shared that with anyone, just do due diligence and get your computer checked out, get your phone checked out. I mean, yeah, it's a total pain in the tush to go to the iPhone store. Like, believe me, it's like the last place I want to be. And it could honestly, and this is so dramatic, but it could save your life.
Yep. 100%. Well, and one thing I didn't even think about and talk about is like they have teddy bears and other stuffed animals that they install cameras in. So again, I don't want you to be overly paranoid about every little thing.
Too late. We
But
already are.
yeah,
This
I
is
know,
fine.
right? And I'm paranoid too, because again, I've been in this industry for a long time. But I mean, like when the kids bring stuff back in the home from your exes, you could also like turn on your Bluetooth and see if it's picking up the tiles. Because wireless is a subset of like a small area, and Bluetooth isn't like generally, like you can't go like from Europe to the United States, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. But just like honestly, just grabbing the stuffed animal and just kind of feeling it. And then if you think they're doing that, then if your kids don't throw a fit, like put it in a completely different room, because if someone put a camera like in a stuffed animal and your kid has it placed like around your laptop, it could be picking everything up. So again, like I said, I'm trying not to make you too paranoid, but hopefully, I mean, my goal was to educate you, to just give you some things to think about. Like I always say, the sky is not falling. I'd rather know more and be more aware than not to know and then be surprised. I mean, there's a lot of evil people in the world, but there's also a lot of great people in the world. So it's not all bad, but the due diligence is huge. And same thing with the tiles. Like if we talked, like people were embedding them in their book bags, or it could be in a stuffed animal. I mean, with some of the things that I provided to you, I think you could basically see if they're picking up those tiles within your thing. And then the big ones, like in cars, there's a bunch of videos how to do it. I didn't include them because I mean, like you should see them. Like they had people on the ground, flashlights, all these other things. But some of the links that I'm providing to you, those are things that you could probably walk through. They're pretty much in layman's terms. I mean, they're not super technical. That would allow you to potentially check those types of things. I mean, and again, if someone really wants to come after you, you can only do so much. But being diligent, and if, just like really quick story. So one of my best friends was married to a very abusive man, and I flew down to where she was living because she was going through a divorce. And I wanted to make sure she stayed because I knew it was abusive, and we were all at her house, and he tried to pick her up and throw over a 3-story balcony, and I had to tackle him to the ground. And I literally sat on him and told him to get the hell out of there, or I was calling the police. And I So I've not been in your situation, but I've lived it with friends and family. And again, if someone is that evil, I mean, you just have to be your diligence, never go outside at night alone, just going to the bank, just all those things. Like I always have like almost like a partner, or a friend or a relative that you have always like on call, you know what I mean? And making sure, if you need to call 911, you can do that. So I know sometimes you might even want to think about a burner phone if you think so much is going on that is separate, that nobody has access other than, the key people that you trust.
Yeah, and we, when we're safety planning, when someone is leaving or there are these really strange stalking type behaviors,
Mhm.
yes, we can be creative and come up with all these things. So if you are watching today, or if you are watching this after the fact, if you need help safety planning, if you need more information, just reach out to me directly. I have
Mhm.
access to a lot of people. I have access to Connie. We can help you
Mhm.
be as safe as we can. So I definitely just want to put that out there. Connie, thank you so much for being with us today. Again, we just wanted this information to be out there. I will make sure that you all get the replay. You will get all of those links. And hello, they are for people like me who actually needs a screenshot of what the stupid phone looks like, because I can't, for whatever, I'll be like looking and it's like, find the three dots. I'm like, there's no freaking three dot, and they're right there. I actually need like the arrow, like the three dots are right here. And so there's some with screenshots and direct steps and things like that. But just know that if you feel isolated, not connected,
Mhm.
we can be that first point of connection for you. So thank you all for spending your Friday lunchtime with us, and be looking for, realistically, I'll get this to you maybe Monday, the replay. And yeah, just keep connected with us. I really appreciate it.
And so it'll probably take like an hour or two for you to get the cloud
The
link,
link. Yep.
just because it compresses and all that. And just for me, like, you guys are survivors, you're kicking ass. You left the situation. I know it can be challenging at times, but my favorite saying, especially to women, is you define who you are, no one else does. So just remember that in your darkest moments, like, you are a survivor, you aren't putting up with it anymore, and you actually allowed yourself to define who you are, not someone else. So congratulations on that for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. And we will catch you on another
Yeah.
something with Rising Beyond Power and Control and the Rising Beyond community.